with you.
Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Jasmine. I'm just a Christian girl striving to know Jesus. And this channel is just all about that journey. So the ups, the downs, the questions, the anxieties. As Christians, we're so hung up on the breakthrough, hung up on the next, hung up on God, what's gonna be bigger and better than this, whatever this is, this situation, this position, this job, this relationship, whatever this is for us, for you and for me. But I remember this morning when I looked at this title, I thought to myself, but what about the time after the breakthrough? Let's talk about that. I think my mantra for this year is to take it one day at a time. Because I think over the years since I was a kid, I was so hung up on the breakthrough, so hung up on the next, so hung up on God, what's gonna be bigger and better than this? But I've found in these recent months that I'm like, God, I don't wanna live like that. I don't want a future of my life where I'm just hung up on the next. At what point am I going to enjoy and embrace the now and the present? Do you want to live that way? Always hung up on the next, always hung up on the thing that you're waiting on from God. And I think though we should be seeking God for breakthrough and for the things that we want and for the things that we need, there has to be some extent. I think there has to be some level of contentment with our present state. And I don't mean contentment with, I'm good with how things are now. These trials and tribulations, it's okay, God. I got this. No, when I mean contentment, do you remember that the Bible says that God gives us a peace that's beyond understanding? What would make peace be beyond understanding? If things are good, the peace you had would be understood, easily understood, because you're like, things are good, my circumstances are good, life is good, the husband is good, the kids are good, whatever, school is good, the job is good. But for me to have a peace beyond understanding means that I'm going through a situation where the peace I have don't make sense. And I'm thinking about Paul, who said this in Philippians 4. He said, I am not saying this because I am in need, for I have learned to be content whatever the circumstances. He said in verse 12, I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret, keyword, the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do all this through Him who gives me strength. So we see in verse 13 the secret that he's talking about in verse 12. He said, the reason I'm able to do this, be content when I have need, be content when I'm full, is because I can do all things through Him who gives me strength. I remember asking God recently, God, why don't I feel fulfilled in the areas that I thought I would be fulfilled in? And then the minute I said that, the thought came, because those things aren't supposed to fulfill me. At least not as the first fulfillment. I believe that God gives us relationships and jobs and opportunities and amazing experiences that in some way, shape, or form will give us a sense of fulfillment. You can't lie and say your family members don't make you feel fulfilled, or your loved ones, or your girlfriend, boyfriend, wife, husband, I don't know, your job. But if God is not our first fulfillment, everything else, even when we have it, will feel shallow. Will feel but this doesn't really connect to my heart though, to my soul. So I want to talk about the time after the breakthrough. Let me use the example that I talked about in a couple previous videos about how God helped me get into school. I remember the simple fact, God told me I would go to school for free. When I went to school for free, it wasn't perfect. That was the breakthrough that once upon a time I was waiting on. I remember praying and being like, God, everything is set to go to school. I just need the money. I just need the little thing. And being so discouraged because I had this big bad word from God, but my situation looked nothing like it. I was just like, well, where's it gonna come from then? Time is ticking. But what I learned through these journeys is that as imperfect as the process was to the breakthrough, And as imperfect as my life was after the breakthrough, I resonate with what Paul said. That I know what it's like, whether you want to be symbolically, because I've never starved, so I've never been hungry. But there are people who are. But even symbolically speaking, I know what it's like to be hungry, to have need essentially. And I also know what it's like to be full. And because I know both, I've learned that both, they come and go as time does. And that's why sometimes when we're so hung up on these two things, we go with the flow, which is the back and forth. But the only stable thing within that whole back and forth for me was God. I remember being so discouraged one summer. I had this summer job and I was just completely out of it. I was in a season. I remember that every day when I got home from work from that summer job, the only thing I looked forward to, with my work clothes still on, I would throw my purse somewhere, literally run in my room, close the door and get on my knees. I didn't even speak. It just gave me so much peace because it felt like I was physically, like that posture of being on my knees, laying over on my bed. I felt the release of everything that was burdening on my heart. And through that time, as tough as it was for me, it was God who was stable. It was God who sustained me. And not sustain meaning like, oh, I'm great through every day. Like, yes, I had my quiet time, I'm good. I was still discouraged. But I had this thing in me that just kept me up, if that makes sense. I had this like, this strength in me that wasn't mine. That every day, even though I dreaded it, I got through it. And even though time felt so slow back then, it passed. So, coming from that, the thing that God gave me, the school life, that journey that He gave me, it was abundant in the sense that it was perfectly imperfect. There were so many difficulties and challenges, so many nights I cried myself to sleep, so many areas in life where I was confused and seeking God about. But then there were just so many amazing opportunities I was able to experience. The friendships I got in university, I literally describe them as gold. Like, when I say God blessed me with some pretty solid people in my life, but more than that, it was people who had a genuine heart for me. If right now you're waiting on a breakthrough, nothing wrong with that. We all are. In some way, shape, or form, we have something that we're waiting on from God. But here's the thing, you always will. Yeah, you always will have something to wait on from God. You always will have something that you need from God. Even when you get the thing you're waiting on, I can tell you, because I've gotten them, you will still need God. I remember when God gave me my first job, I thought, well, dang, everything's gonna be nice and chill now. Got a job, I'm this, I'm that. Until I went through the day-to-day office life and realized, God, I need you. To not just thrive, but to survive here. I think unconsciously we have this narrative in our mind, or this expectation that once we get what we're waiting for, we're good. And we don't say that, but I think we live like that. Because while we're waiting so like with so much discouragement and so much like life is not good until that comes through. I have no purpose until that comes through. I love that verse in the Bible that says, don't worry about tomorrow. Today has enough trouble for itself. And when you read that, you feel like God understands, you know? For that to be in the Bible, it can only come from a God who understands life. To know that truly every day has enough trouble of its own. We get so discouraged while we're waiting on something from God that it hinders and shakes our faith so much we're tempted to walk away. And that's a shame, because when you read the Bible and you read its instructions, and when I say instructions, I mean like when you read stories like Paul's, right? Like the verse that I had read earlier, you see clearly that that is not what God expects from us, is to have this this thing where when we want him and when we need him, he'll just zap his finger and boom, a job comes, and boom, the permanent resident card comes through, and boom, like the man or the woman comes into your life. I think the reason why he allows, and this was just so beautiful in a sermon I listened to recently. The reason why God allows struggle in our life is so that we'll always have a reliance on him. Because if we're honest with ourselves, how many of you can say that when you got what you prayed for, you forgot God? Or your seeking him began to diminish? If you know what I'm talking about, drop a comment below and be like, me, exclamation point. Because I know I've been there. I know what it's like to literally lay in my bed and not move because I needed to move from God. Praying and crying and worshiping. And I also know what it's like that when I got what I prayed for. Remember that friends I mentioned earlier? When I was lonely and had no friends, all I knew was God. But the minute God put friends in my life, I remember how I would be getting dressed to go out with them and doing my makeup and doing certain things and being like, when's the last time I did Bible study? I couldn't say. When's the last time I just took time for God? I couldn't say. Where a couple of times I literally had to tell my friends, y'all, I'm gonna have to let y'all go without me. I need some time to just kind of dwell with God because I felt so bad. And I'm like, God, look at that. Look how quickly we are to forget you when you give us what we desire. When you are waiting and you're stressed and tired and frustrated and outright discouraged and disappointed, you can take that to him in prayer and worship. And in prayer and worship, just receive him. Receive a peace that's beyond understanding. That's no matter where you are, before the breakthrough or after the breakthrough, your focus should be God, your kingdom, and your righteousness. How do I play a role? And I love this imagery that I got a year ago. I literally saw myself in a kingdom, like kind of walking around and being like, this is God's kingdom. Looking around and being like, I have purpose here. Like God, and just being so curious, like, well, God, what's my purpose here? Like, I have a purpose here. I saw that kind of like in my mind. And then from then on, I have such a deeper appreciation for what it means to seek God's kingdom and his righteousness, to contribute to it, to add to it. Not because we're perfect beings who will get everything right. Even in our spiritual discipline, we need God to help us follow God. So guys, that's all I wanted to come here and say. If this video blessed you, make sure to share it with a friend, like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in my next video.